Despite a decades-long drug war, billions of dollars spent, and millions of Americans locked up in prisons, drug use rates have remained relatively constant. Any economist will tell you that as long as there's demand, there will always be entrepreneurs with a supply ready to make a profit. When a drug dealer is busted, it's nothing more than a job opening for someone else to fill. This is Economics 101. Join Students for Sensible Drug Policy to help teach lawmakers this simple economics lesson. Visit www.schoolsnotprisons.com to find out more information about SSDP, if there's a chapter at your school, or how to start one. It's time to join the growing opposition to our country's failed war on drugs and start an open, honest, and rational discussion of alternative solutions to our nation's drug problems.
He's going to give a presentation, and afterwards we'll do Q&A. So while he's talking, think about questions and stuff that you're interested in that you want to ask afterwards.
All right, thank you. First off, I'm really proud to be here. I've met some SSDP people last year at Kent State. There was a regional conference I was at, the University of Iowa and Case Western, and I know on a night like tonight you guys would probably think of 100 things you'd rather be doing than sitting here listening to this guy drone on about drug policy. I'll tell you a little bit about how I got here. When I got out of graduate school here at UC, I got a job in the first methadone program, one of the first methadone programs that were being put up around the country. It was in the middle of the heroin epidemic. Vietnam was kind of winding down, and there was a big concern about service people coming back with a huge heroin problem, which didn't materialize. We could talk about that later, but I moved on from there to Council on Alcoholism, and that was a kind of neat time too, because there was money coming in from the state. So one of our jobs was to try to arrange treatment programs, services for alcoholics and their families. So we started the drop-in center, halfway houses, programs for women, tried to set up prevention programs in schools. We set up the first family intervention program, which you now see on A&E, which is a nice technique. And first services for children of alcoholics in the cities. At age 40, I decided to make a career change and went to the Cincinnati Police Academy and became a Cincinnati police officer. And I got out of the academy, and Cincinnati was in the midst, like all the rest of the city, all the rest of the country, in the midst of kind of the crack epidemic. And I worked in over the Rhine, and Winton Terrace, North Side, Camp Washington, and learned a lot of lessons about crack and drug use. Spent most of my career at the police academy. I was made commander down there. Wrote a couple books on policing, one on community policing, one on police use of force. And so any of you guys are one of the 43 people that bought either of those books. Thank you very much. At the end of my career, I got appointed to be in charge of the vice squad. And the good news is as I look around, I really don't recognize anybody here. I was in charge of citywide drug enforcement. And at that time, Cincinnati Police, we had basically two different kinds of programs working on drug enforcement. We were part of a cooperative group that did, it was called Regional Narcotics Unit, and they were targeting big distributors, people who were bringing in trailer trucks full of dope. And the unit we had was called the Street Corner Unit, and what we did was try to target folks on street corners that were buying and selling. So we would do buy bust, where we go up and buy drugs from somebody, and the second after they sold them, we'd snatch them up. Or we'd do jump outs on people buying and selling drugs, and we arrested thousands of people. So when I got down there, we decided to try something a little bit different and believe that from a business perspective, there's these major traffickers and wholesale people selling to the somebody's giving it to these guys on the street to sell. So we thought we'd target the wholesale level. And we created a special unit, got some really talented cops, and so we started looking for wholesale folks that had kind of in that niche. And over the next several months, we made record busts of drugs. We seized records amounts of money. And the news media was always very excited, and we'd have one of these busts, and the news media would find out about it, and we'd do one of these things, which I know every one of you guys has seen on TV, where we pile the drugs there and the weapons that we got and the money. And I was one of the people standing there like this, and everybody thought it was really cool. And I would always ask my guys after one of these, did we have any impact? You know, are there people walking around the streets of Cincinnati looking for drugs that can't find them? And the answer was always no. And I came to believe that no matter how many people we bust, there always seems to be somebody else. And you'll see, at least weekly, in the newspaper, on the news, where Mexican authorities, DEA, or some local police agency bust the latest drug kingpin. That's always the words they use, the drug kingpin. And do you think it ever has an impact on trafficking? It really doesn't, because there's always somebody ready to step up and take that person's place. Same thing at the street level. We would go out, we'd have these sweeps, and we would, you know, target these little knuckleheads on the corner selling drugs, and, you know, we'd arrest 80 or 100 a day. And what do you think? What happened? Next day? Might be a little bit better, but a week later it was like we'd never been there. And there's never a shortage of people who are willing to step up and take that role of selling, either at the major level or at the street corner level. So, I'm going to talk tonight about what I think we can do. And you guys are all here for a variety of motivations. And, you know, I don't really, we all got different ways of coming about this. My major motivation is I'm trying to cut down on the violence that's associated with the illegal drug market. In early January, at a place called Falcon Lake, which is a little strip between Mexico and the U.S., very popular tourist place, a man from Chicago named David Hartley and his wife are jet skiing on the lake, which was a common practice. There's some ruins there. Tourists would jet ski and look at these ruins. And so that particular day, for one reason or another, they run across some trafficking folks who, for whatever reason, take exception to them, open fire from speedboats on these people on jet skis, killing David Hartley, and his wife flees to the U.S. side. The Mexican authorities, a little bit concerned about the impact on the tourism business, appoint a guy named Ronaldo Flores, one of their top homicide investigators, to investigate this case of David Hartley. 3 days after the big press conference announcing that Detective Flores is going to take this over, Detective Flores doesn't show up at work, and they can't find him at home. And 2 days after that, his head is delivered to a military base inside a suitcase. 10 or 11 days ago in Acapulco, a place we're all a little bit familiar with, 27 murders in one day. There's now stretches of Mexico that are devoid of law enforcement because they've all been killed, and the typical practice is beheading, and nobody is willing, thank God, nobody's willing to step up and be the next victim. Can you really blame them? The international drug business is a $500 billion a year business, bigger than the auto industry, bigger than gas and oil combined. The world's #1 supply of poppies for heroin comes from Afghanistan, which had record crops 2006, 2007, on up till the date we have statistics. A lot of that money is going to support Taliban insurgents. Mexican traffickers now control most of the cocaine and methamphetamine and marijuana coming into this country. So the question for me is, what do we do about this violence, not only internationally, but locally? And I've been on more than I can count cases here in Cincinnati, and an awful lot of our homicides are what cops refer to as drug deals gone bad. That's kind of a euphemistic way of putting what's often a really tragic situation where people come to certain locations and they're there to buy drugs, and they're like sheep coming down there, and these guys, people are in the drug business at the local level. They maintain their hold on that business because of their willingness and ability to use violence. And we've got parades of victims showing up to buy drugs, and too often they get shot, killed, raped, beat up. It's not a pretty picture, and everybody's always sorry, but one of the most dangerous things you can do is enter that illegal drug market, become a purchaser in that market. So what do we do about it? I'm going to say the L word for marijuana. Who can tell me, how many countries in the world have legalized marijuana? Anybody got a guess?
Zero.
Yeah, absolutely zero. There's a few that have decriminalized it, and we sort of confuse that with legalization. And I'm going to tell you, I'm for legalization. A lot of you are interested in the medical marijuana issue, and I know there's a lot of energy around that. People think it's a great thing. To me, it's a half step. I mean, it's like making out with somebody on the couch when you're interested in something more. Why are we even thinking about medical marijuana? Okay? Full-blown legalization. And that moves it from a illegal to a controlled regulatory system, and we can talk a little bit more about how that can be set up. The major reason why it's so important is that 60% of the revenue that supports the illegal cartels comes from marijuana. So, in one fell swoop, we can steal 60% of these folks' revenue, the revenue they're using to kill each other, to kill other people. How you guys, some of you are involved in organizations, businesses. How many businesses do you know could withstand the loss of 60% of their revenue and just keep on? It would be a tremendous blow to them. I'm just going to make a note to myself to talk a little bit about California and medical marijuana and the impact on the illegal market. So, take it out. Now, I say that my motivation in talking about this is, again, concern about violence internationally and locally. This is going to be legalized, and I may not be around to see it, but you guys certainly will. It's something that's coming, and I think it's just a matter of time. I used to work for an old captain when I started the police department. If you ever moved away from the company line, he would call you in and he'd say, "Son, you're trying to go northbound on a southbound train." And that's what I think. The drug war is coming to a halt, particularly with marijuana. It's going to happen. The day after it happens, don't look for Howard Rahtz in line to buy any of this. Okay, I don't care about it. Okay, I'm not going to use it, but what I want to do, we got to cut the dollars away from these people. Okay. How do we know that that's going to work? California was the first state that implemented medical marijuana in 1996. So we've had a real-life lab experiment in what went on. Medical marijuana, the case is people were suffering from these horrendous, horrible diseases, and so marijuana becomes a palliative for those folks. Who would withhold anything from somebody in this situation. Terminal cancer patients, people with MS. Would any of us say, if it's going to make you feel better, go for it? Who cares? Okay? And that's the way it was originally marketed, as cancer patients, multiple sclerosis, people with serious disease, Lou Gehrig's disease, that this might be helpful to them. Well, what happened as time went by, these dispensaries are set up, people are prescribing medical marijuana for a variety of conditions, and cancer and multiple sclerosis have gone, we've gone from cancer, multiple sclerosis to insomnia, anxiety, athlete's foot, jock rash. I mean, now you can get medical marijuana for almost all of that. So the number of people involved in this business has skyrocketed. The products that are involved, it's not just smokable, it's in tinctures, lotions, all kinds of food stuff. There's one chain in California called the Pharmacy, F-A-R-M. They have a full-time pastry chef whose specialty is putting marijuana into all these concoctions for people to buy. So with so many people, what we've got now economically is a gray market in marijuana. Okay? What's happened economically is that this has hurt the cartels more than all the law enforcement in the world has done. They have lost serious revenue because of this medical marijuana, which shows to me that legalization can have a big impact on these guys. Okay? And I think we should go ahead and do it. How would medical marijuana look, or how would legalized marijuana look? And the answer is we can go back to the end of Prohibition in the early 1930s. Are you guys familiar with the 10th Amendment to the Constitution? 10th Amendment to the Constitution says all those responsibilities not previously enumerated in the Constitution resort to the states. And at the end of Prohibition, what happened was each state made a decision how they're going to handle alcohol. And about 10% of this country is still dry today. You know, in certain places, Kentucky, Texas is a big state. You can't buy any booze, the rules vary. But each state was allowed to set up their own system. At the end of marijuana prohibition, I would suspect we're going to have the same kind of system. It may be at 7-Eleven, we're going to have operating hour restrictions, we're going to have advertising restrictions, we're going to have labeling, we're going to have age restrictions. All the things that occur now with alcohol, we're going to borrow from and do with marijuana. Okay? Nobody is saying we hand out this stuff to 15-year-olds or 12-year-olds or whatever. It's an adult choice, much the same as alcohol. In fact, from a pharmacologic point of view, I would trade marijuana for alcohol in a heartbeat. I know from the point of view of violence, which we've been talking about, I've been to hundreds of calls for domestic violence, and almost 100% of them, either the offender or the victim or both are drinking or drunk. I cannot recall a single episode of domestic